Alrighty, okay. So welcome everybody to this exciting new IT Cork Open Forum, and it's funded by Cork County Council and supported by AgriTech Ireland. So today we're going to explore and demystify today and tomorrow's AgriTech research. I would like to extend our sincere thanks to Cork County Council for funding this event and to AgriTech Ireland for supporting it. This afternoon we'll be looking at why the future of global AgriTech resides with industry. We will give you a snapshot of the different AgriTech research organizations and the projects they currently have underway, and we'll explore how your tech business can build links into research. We have an excellent lineup of panelists, each of whom are all experts in their own field, and I'd like to personally thank them for taking time this afternoon to be here with us. I would also like to thank our event chair, Professor Edmund Harty, who is one of the world's leading innovators in the AgriTech sector. We're honoured and delighted to have Councillor Gillian Coughlin, Mayor of the County of Cork, opening this event. Thank you, Mayor, for taking time in your busy calendar to be with us here today and to open this event. It's my pleasure to hand to the Mayor next for her opening address, after which we will go straight to Professor Harty, who will introduce the panel and kickstart the presentations. From myself and everyone at IT Cork, a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us on this Monday afternoon. And now over to you, Mayor Coughlin. Thank you.
Gormagat Gillian, agus Steve, Corda, is more an honor dom of Anshanov on Port Glaca in Sun Session Shop. I am delighted to be here as Mayor of the County of Cork today, and my congratulations to IT at Cork and AgriTech Ireland on the launch of this new initiative. The Irish dairy sector is a major contributor to economic activity in County Cork. It supports jobs from dairy farming to milk processing, distribution, marketing and research. Nationally, as you know, we export approximately 90% of our dairy output to 124 countries worldwide. The value of these exports was more than €4.4 billion in 2019, well up on the €2 billion in 2015 when EU milk quotas were abolished. This growth in exports reflects the increased global demand for dairy products. Over the last decade or so, our farmers and food producers have earned a reputation for sustainable, climate-sensitive food production, demonstrating that the sector is well able to adapt, innovate, and become more enterprising. However, despite the strength of the sector, there are challenges ahead. It is almost incredible to think that by 2050, the global population will have reached 9 billion people, and that 66% of them will be living in urban areas. When that time comes, the major challenges will be to supply their energy needs, to supply clean water and safe food in an economic, social, and environmentally sustainable way. Other challenges will include managing the natural resources needed to grow food, which are already stretched, dealing with the greenhouse gas emissions generated by agricultural activities, and the vulnerability of agricultural activities to climate change. We here on Cork County Council are acutely aware of the challenges that lie ahead, and our support for this forum is part of our local response to the global challenge. Our response is focused on three objectives: promoting sustainability, promoting the development of safe, sustainable and resilient communities within the context of an aging society, and three, raising awareness about the capacity of the research centres in our region to help small and medium-sized enterprises to innovate, develop new products and services, or overcome a particular challenge. I expect that the panel will refer to that later. Innovation and the application of research will be critical for the future development of a sustainable agricultural sector if it is to overcome the challenges mentioned. It is important that researchers, industry, and the tech sector have a forum where they can engage with one another to network and exchange ideas and information. There's an excellent panel of speakers here today, which I'm sure are ready to speak, and I'm looking forward to hearing you speak about these challenges and about the potential solutions to these challenges. I'm really looking forward to the webinar. Thank you for inviting me to open it. Agus Ganari Gagal Corda, Gurmagas.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, for your address, and Jill for the introduction. My name is Professor Edmund Harty. I will be chairing the event this afternoon. This is an area I'm very excited about, is the whole AgriTech sector. I would like to advise you that there will be an opportunity for questions at the end, so please feel free to use the Q&A function. Also, towards the end of the session, we will launch some poll questions which will help us to connect you with our panelists. So please do answer those, or if people want to connect on LinkedIn after as well, that's okay. Now, I would like to introduce you to our panel, which includes Dr. John Barry, is manager at the IMAR Technology Gateway at MTU Kerry. Our second speaker will be Professor Donna Berry. He's a senior principal investigator at Tagisk and director at the Vista Milk Research Centre. Our third speaker this morning will be Hazel Peavoy. She is a senior strategic business partner in agriculture at the Walton Institute in Waterford. And our fourth speaker, back to County Cork again, is Dr. Alan O'Riordan, and he's a research fellow at Tyndall. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the speakers as we go on. And I suppose first up is Dr. John Barry. So John is manager of the IMAR Technology Gateway in MTU Kerry. He leads a team of engineers developing near-to-market solutions for industry encompassing sensors, IoT, automation, robotics, RFID and data analytics. Previously, he was a senior research fellow and project manager in IMAR. He has led research on autonomous systems, data analytics and engineering simulation. So John, I would like to ask you if you would go ahead with your presentation and tell us about all the activities that are happening in the IMAR Research Centre in MTU Kerry.
Yes, hi Edmund, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, okay, so hopefully, and you can also see the slides, Edmund.
Not quite, John, there's a...
They don't look correct to me.
No. So move to the next slide, John, just to check it, please.
Yeah.
John, I think you're on two screens, yeah?
No, just one here now. I'll just try reshare, just bear with me now. Now, does that look okay, Edmund?
Yeah, that's perfect now, John.
Great, okay, so thanks very much, Edmund, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for a very interesting opening. So I think many people can give you a perspective on AgriTech research and industry, and we're very pleased to be able to speak on behalf of IMAR Technology Gateway. We're based in Munster Technological University in one of the Kerry campuses, and we also obviously have colleagues in Cork's, in 4 campuses in Cork actually. So the topics that we would like to cover are, we'll explain who we are, and then maybe reference the technologies and the companies that we work with. Then in relation to AgriTech, we'll share a little bit about our experience and maybe offer a perspective on future challenges. And I think a key point then, particularly for the enterprises within the audience, will be the state funding supports that are available. We'll finish then towards the end, we'll look at the broader MTU RDI ecosystem, so Munster Technological University, Research, Development and Innovation ecosystem. It's a very important point, I think, for companies developing technology to appreciate the depth and scale of research capabilities, which are largely funded by the state for the purposes of helping enterprise innovate. So ourselves in IMAR, we are a technology gateway. We are funded, most of our funding comes from Enterprise Ireland to provide those research and innovation supports to companies in Ireland. We're part of a larger research centre within the campus here in Kerry, and most of our projects within the gateway are co-funded by EI grants. So the centre itself is funded by Enterprise Ireland, and then many of the projects that we do in partnership with companies, they're also funded by Enterprise Ireland. We also engage in direct funded consultancy projects, staff training and upskilling, And a really important point to mention is it doesn't necessarily need to lead to a project or discussions. We're very happy to engage companies. If we can help, you know, in a couple of phone calls, that's great as well. So we are IMAR is one of 16 technology gateways in the country. These are, shall we say, centers of excellence that are hosted by institutes of technology and now technological universities. So you can see in the map here, the 16 technology gateways. We've highlighted IMAR here in the southwest, and then also the other 15 gateways. And you will see on the map as well, the areas of technology that each of these gateways specialize in. So our name IMAR, it comes basically from the original focus areas of the research group. One was the area of intelligent mechatronics, which today might be better understood as smart machines. Most of our work there is in the area of automation for industrial systems. And then also RFID has been a long-standing research interest and area of expertise for us. So RFID is radio frequency identification. It's a system of electronic tags, very low cost electronic tags, readers, and then software systems. It can be used for tracking boxes in a warehouse, for example, or tracking the position or identifying animals on a farm. So over the 10 years we've been working here, many other technology teams have developed. So for example, system and equipment development, mechanical design and prototyping, embedded systems, and so on. Now, I suppose a key point is that many of these technologies are complementary. So for example, in the area of AgriTech, if you wanted, if a client wanted to develop a system for monitoring a physiological parameter in a herd of animals, you know, that system would incorporate various sensors, possibly onboard computing capabilities. It may be IoT enabled, and there will usually be some element of data analytics and possibly even artificial intelligence. So there are technology suite, if you like, that we apply for client-specific innovation projects. We work with companies of all sizes in IMAR, startups, 1, 2, you know, people, startups, SMEs, and multinationals. Our projects within the Technology Gateway are mostly funded by Enterprise Ireland. Within the broader IMAR Research Centre, a lot of our projects would lever Science Foundation Ireland and European funding. So on average, we would complete about 50 projects per annum, all with companies, private enterprise. And most companies that we deal with, we would engage in multiple projects, so repeat business essentially. And we work across all sectors. So AgriTech, the team of today, we would have had the privilege of working with Edmund on many occasions in the past and Dairymaster. And then you can see other big names in AgriTech and also AquaTech, important area to mention maybe. And then maybe some of the more recent companies we've worked with. In manufacturing, there's a lot of manufacturing in the region. Some of the companies we've worked with are listed there. Food, beverage, pharma. So Danone, for example, will be a very important processor of milk products in the region. And then medical devices. And then there's many other professional services, digital services that we have developed for clients over the years. So in relation to technologies and our experience that would be relevant to AgriTech, well, for example, we would, in relation to animal tracking and monitoring and animal identification and even recognition, we would have had completed many projects in these areas. And I should say, all the project work that we would complete with clients is of a confidential nature. So today I will merely reference the technologies that we have previously deployed or that could be deployed towards AgriTech solutions. So we've also worked a lot of software systems, applications, mobile and web-based applications, farm recommender systems, for example. In terms of farm implements, we would have completed a lot of projects on implement design, so the mechanical, electrical design, the integration of sensors and smart sensors. Another more recent area that we've started to work in is position tracking. So GPS RTK is a positioning technology. It's GPS, as you know from your car, but RTK is real-time kinematics that provide positioning accuracies of 2 to 5 centimeters. So that type of technology is very relevant to precision agriculture. We've also completed several projects in the area of water management and monitoring, quality monitoring. And we have some experience in land and animal remote surveillance. So things like drones, utilizing satellite data, of which there is an abundance. We would have worked in those areas. So these are the technologies that we can apply to any innovation projects in the area of AgriTech. I suppose the key challenge for private enterprise is to identify, the unique value proposition to your customer, the farmer. I suppose we are a research entity, and a lot of our perspective might come in terms of the future challenges. A lot of our perspective comes from policy and research funding calls. So I suppose the common agricultural policy has been pivotal in terms of how agriculture has evolved, and will most likely continue to be so. So the next CAP from 2023 onwards has 9 key objectives, of which 3 relate to the economics of farming, but interestingly 3 relate to environmental aspects. So as the Mayor referenced, sustainability now is a key theme pretty much in all aspects of life. Now, what might be interesting if you're not aware of it is a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And this analysis has been completed by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And we would see that as providing some insight into where technologies may need to go, what solutions they may need to provide in the future. So, for example, smart farming, digitalization and precision agriculture are all recurrent opportunities within the more than 100 opportunities that are actually listed. And there's an equivalent number of strengths, weaknesses and threats listed. Yes, this graphic, by the way, just, I suppose, emphasizes the intent, at least of the European Union in terms of the next phase of CAP, in which a quarter of direct payments, it seems, will relate to eco schemes. Just another perspective on, the interests, in this case, of the Department of Agriculture. There was a funding call earlier in the year. It's now closed, but maybe it's still useful to acknowledge or consider what the objectives were, what the priorities were for the department. So there were 5 thematic areas, and we will provide the slides so you can study these, but 5 thematic areas. I would say at least in 3 of them, digital technologies have a role to play. And there were also 16 targeted projects, including, for example, support of the development of the European agricultural data space. That's a very aspirational concept, but one that the European Union seems to put some emphasis on. And we've included also references if you wish to read more on these topics. And then finally, Horizon Europe is the next large research and innovation program funded by the European Union, and 10 billion of that will be directed towards food farming, rural and the bioeconomy. Now, next, maybe I can consider what funding supports are available to companies. So practically on the ground, how can enterprises engage with us in the 3rd level sector? This graphic shows the various supports that are available generally to companies. They include RDI providers, such as ourselves in IMAR and the other technology gateways in the country and technology centres. But I'll focus maybe on the funding that Enterprise Ireland offer for collaborative developments. So these would include innovation partnerships and innovation vouchers. So innovation vouchers, over 5,000 have been redeemed by companies within the country. Each company can now avail of up to 4 vouchers, 3 fully funded €5,000 vouchers, 1 fully funded €10,000 voucher. Clients of all 4 state development agencies can avail of these vouchers. So it's not just clients of Enterprise Ireland, but also local enterprise offices, UDROS and so on. Very simple application. There's a very simple application process. We and all the other technology gateways can talk you through that. We can also formulate the knowledge questions that you need to submit in order to get the voucher. And it's a pretty rapid decision, 2 to 3 weeks. So these vouchers can be used for a lot of different things: new product, process, business model development, also new service developments, digital services, for example, customized training. There are some exceptions or exclusions, and they're listed on the link that we've shown here. So if you've not availed of vouchers, I would suggest, maybe seriously consider these. The only real cost to yourselves is the time invested in speaking with us, and obviously you will pay the VAT. Now, innovation partnerships, again, these are available to all companies supported by all 4 state development agencies, EI, IDA, LEOs, etc. They're for manufacturing or internationally traded services companies. There's grants available up to 200,000 euros. There will be a company contribution, cash and in-kind, and the projects tend to be of a larger, fairly significant nature, so 6 to 24 months duration. Again, these are fairly effortless for the company involved, in that the likes of the IMAR Technology Gateway, we will write the research proposal for you. So we will do that 50-page document. The key thing for the company is that you secure support of your development advisor early in the process. Once you have your development advisor on board, that's a significant help in getting the project approved, because it is subject to technical and commercial assessment by EI. Importantly, so for a full innovation partnership project, because they are quite significant, there's 2 routes to progress those. One is an outline application, 10-page application, which we also would complete for the company. And the second then is a feasibility study. Again, a short application form that we would complete. And that feasibility, if you like, is a mechanism to de-risk the project. So before the client or the company would pay cash, invest in the project, you get a fully funded up to 9,000 euro grant to allow you to assess the feasibility of your innovation idea. So yeah, typically because it's a larger project, it does have a slightly longer lead time. So 2 to 4 months duration typically would be when you will have a decision after that period of time. So in terms of what these projects can deliver, so an innovation voucher, for example, that might get you one full-time engineer for a 5-week period. It will vary depending on that researcher's experience. But for example, a recent project we completed in IMAR was a connected therapeutic device with force sensing, and that allowed a physician to remotely monitor the recovery and performance of the patient on a mobile application. So all the electronic hardware was developed, the software, and then the sensor integrated into the therapeutic device. For 5,000 euros, we think that's pretty good value. You can also combine vouchers. So for example, one company we worked with recently had 2 innovation vouchers, and over the course of 8 weeks, an engineer developed an Internet of Things data source, messaging system, and real-time interactive dashboard for manufacturing process. So there's the manufacturing equipment integrated with sensors, and then we would have developed a dashboard, an operational dashboard for monitoring the performance of that process. And that was also then linked into the company's ERP system. Now that could equally be, a piece of farm apparatus in a project, and a similar, I suppose, guideline might apply in terms of what's achievable. As an example of a larger innovation partnership project, for example, a grant of 200,000 euros that may get you, 3 full-time engineers over a period of 12 months. And in a recently completed project, we would have developed a prototype automation system for a large company here in Killarney. And if I try and share the video, hopefully it works, you will see that this is quite a complex system. It has 3 industrial robots, which perform a series of a variety of tasks and operations. And then you've got all the associated automation equipment and control equipment. So they're examples of what Enterprise Ireland innovation supports can deliver. Also useful to note, I'll scroll through this quite quickly, but useful to note that IMAR and also all the other gateways in the country actually have quite an extensive range of equipment, which is paid for by Enterprise Ireland so as to support companies innovate. So for example, in IMAR, we have a very high spec portable data processing rig, which can support secure on-site data analytics or simulating large-scale testing of IoT systems. We've got a robotics laboratory, industrial sensing and wireless communication suite, which can be applied not just to industrial settings, but also, for example, farm agriculture settings. And then also reflecting our track record in RFID, we've got probably the most extensive suite of RFID test equipment, I imagine, in the country. So maybe I'll also just reference quickly ACE. This is a partner entity within MTU Kerry. It's the AgriTech Centre of Excellence, and they specialize in virtual and augmented reality technologies and services. It does extend quite significantly beyond AgriTech, but they've probably one of the most extensive AR capabilities within the country. And so the list of equipment is provided there. So AR and VR is no longer, if you like, just you know, of technical interest. It's of real commercial value to companies, for example, in providing remote commissioning and maintenance services and sales and technical support. There is a broad ecosystem of research providers. For example, within MTU alone, you know, we've got the 2 clusters, AgriTech Ireland, who are supporting this event, but also Circular Economy, Bioeconomy cluster. Within MTU, we have 4 technology gateways, ourselves and IMAR, plus our colleagues in Cork Campus, Kappa and Nimbus, Shannon ABC, who would be a life sciences gateway. And then also we have Applied Internet of Things cluster, which is a single point of contact for any company developing Internet of Things devices. So I might just wrap up there if that's okay, and just maybe run over some key takeaways. So digital transformation and sustainability, these are 2 key, if you like, megatrends or drivers in society generally, in enterprise generally, but also in agriculture. And that's probably most strongly reflected in the thinking towards CAP for 2023 onwards. There are numerous state supports to help companies. This is in the form of technology gateways, technology centres, even the SFI centres would play a role here. And there's also numerous funding mechanisms. The RDI ecosystem may appear somewhat complex to navigate, but I would strongly suggest just pick up the phone to at least one of the tech gateways. We in IMAR will be very happy to assist. And then we provided some details on the innovation vouchers and the feasibility and innovation partnership grants, which really require very little energy on the part of companies to avail of these. We do most of the application work and obviously the project itself. So Edmund, thanks very much to everybody, and we can take any questions later.
Okay, thanks very much, John. I'm going to come back to you with questions there, maybe when we have the whole panel together. So I'll keep things moving a minute. So up next, we have Professor Donna Barry from Teagasc. Donna is a Senior Principal Investigator in Quantitative Genetics in Teagasc. It's a hugely interesting area, and he's also a Director of the Vistamilk SFI Research Centre. And following his bachelor's degree in agricultural science at UCD, he undertook a PhD in dairy cattle genetics in Wageningen University in the Netherlands. As director of Vistamilk, he leads a team of more than 200 scientists in the development and the deployment of digital technologies in precision dairy production. So I will hand over to you, Donna, and you can tell us about all the magic that's happening in Vistamilk. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ed. Can you see the slides, Ed? Yeah?
Perfect.
Brilliant stuff. So as Ed said, we are an SFI centre. We are co-funded actually by the Department of Agriculture, which means we span probably a lot larger the technology readiness levels from the more basic sciences all the way to applied and deployment. You can see the partner institutes in the bottom. So Teagasc is the host institute, but of course we have partners like the Tyndall Institute. So Alan O'Riordan speaking later as a PI, also the old TSSG, now Walton. So Hazel is going to talk later as well. But of course, University College Dublin, University College Cork as well. So I think most people will be pretty well familiar with the challenges that exist. Everybody at this stage, of course, is well familiar with Brexit. That was an issue for the agri-food industry, given that around 38% of our product actually went to the UK. But of course, also there's issues associated with foreign direct investment, especially in the Trump era, where they were trying to make America great again, etc., and the slowing down of international funds coming into Ireland. Everybody is also well familiar with climate change at the moment. I actually think a lot broader than climate change. I think more of the environment. I believe nitrogen is probably going to be a more pressing issue in water, its impact on water quality, as opposed to actually climate change itself. And of course, the nutrient imbalances that exist, especially with the advent of social media and its impact on people's choices. From a dairy cow perspective in particular, we have the whole issue of animal welfare, particularly that associated with the young male calf, and we have lots of solutions now to actually try to ameliorate a lot of those impacts. Since, the Mayor mentioned about the abolishment of milk quotas in 2015, since that abolishment, we're now actually really trading on the global market, and there's massive volatility in milk price. So it's crucial that we maintain resilience to that particular volatility, and that means keeping down your efficiencies of production. And then finally, in the bottom right, those of you that are well familiar with Irish agriculture know that we're a grass-based system, so we rely very heavily on the pasture. And again, looking out at your own lawn, you know that the grass growth changes, but also the soil conditions change dramatically, not just from year to year, but also within years. So we have this added dimension of trying to match the yield or the quality and quantity of grass against the cow's natural cycle. So our vision is to be an agent of responsible growth for both the Irish dairy industry, but also the agri-tech industry, by being world leaders in what we call fundamental, so that's more basic or lower TRL level, versus also translation or applied or higher TRL level, with a particular focus on pasture-based dairying. But of course, a lot of what we develop in Vista Milk is equally applicable to other production systems. For example, the use of methane reducing feed additives, which we've a good bit of experience in. We have actually the only machines in the country, we have 4 of them, to measure methane emissions in grazing animals. And we've done an extensive piece of work on different products over the last few years. We have 3 strategic goals which align pretty closely with the UN development goals. So we've food security, obviously, sustainability, and an interesting one, which is prosperity and societal enrichment. Again, you get on the Twitter, the Instagrams, the Facebooks of the world, you see the narrative, and a lot of the time it's anti-agriculture. So what we want to do is develop the facts that go behind whether a lot of these things are true, but also provide the opportunity for others to present the true facts as opposed to hearsay. We have 3 guiding principles within the Vista Milk, which we try to apply to all of our projects. Very, very simple: measure, predict, and act. So the likes of Alan O'Riordan from Tyndall will be talking about the measure component of it. So that's your sensing systems, then your data analytics, which John talked about, and then finally your actual acting on or managing your animals or pasture, depending on that. That's a lot of the time, that's the crucial component. And of course, the act, you can see it's a kind of a circle that also influences the measure. Alan will be the first one to tell you that he can develop all these fancy sensors inside his lab in Tyndall, but once he puts them out into the real life world, then he can identify where the cracks are, and he has to go back again and modify it accordingly. We have 2 main kind of streams within Vista Milk. We have what we call enabling technologies or platforms. You can see those on the bottom. Again, Alan from the sensors perspective, Hazel from the communications, omics, both soil, grass, and animals and humans, data analytics, test beds, not just farm test beds, but also milk processor test beds, and then the whole integration and deployment. And this is the latter is really crucial when it comes to data and the interoperability between databases. So industry is not involved in any of those platforms. They're more basic, and also they're kind of like a pool that we can dip into to get expertise, especially from the data analytic and the sensors perspective. So if we're looking at trying to measure something in the soil, we might dip into the sensors into Alan and say, look, we're stuck here to measure nitrates in the soil. Can you give us a hand? Alan then, using his platform tools, will develop those sensors, and then we'll dip into the other platform, which is your data analytics, to say, well, can you interpret what Alan's after delivering for us to actually make something that we can then deploy to the farmers? So we have 9 then spokes. And these all involve industry partners. So all the way from soil to society. So we start off at soil, pasture management and breeding, moving on then through the animal at the top of this graph. So animal nutrition, health and breeding. And then at the bottom is the milk processing, dairy products, digestion, and the nutri-functionality of the milk. I just want to quickly give you a kind of an example of what I'm talking about here. So you can go into Aldi or Lidl or SuperValu or Tesco, wherever, and you see all these different products. And all these products are different. Some of them, you have your normal milks and your cream, and they're generic to the population. But then you have your high omega-3s or your high vitamin Ds, your super milks, something. They're all going for different demographics. And a lot of us would think about, and this is where the mindset was until recently, was the milk processors get a pool of milk, and then they process it differently to produce this different product portfolio. However, we would argue, well, whatever gets into the milk processor, your Plan B's, your Dairy Goals, or your Kerrys of the world, well, that's actually a function of the animals. So how you managed or fed the animal, but also the genetics and how the two of them interact. So rather than saying, this is the pool of milk I have to work with, you say, well, can we actually modify that pool of milk? So from a nutrition and management perspective, I talked about Ireland's reliance on grazed grass. So therefore, the genetics and nutrition and management of the grass has an influence. But where does the nutrition from the grass come from? Well, it comes from the soil. So actually, if you want to modify the product portfolio in the fridges in your supermarket, you would, for a lot of these, have to go back all the way to the soil. And this becomes also hugely important when we talk about carbon. And you can see, those of you interested in kind of distributed ledgers or blockchain type technology, you can see blockchain written all over this, both from a carbon perspective, but also from a medicinal perspective or any other kind of features like that. Then, of course, you have products like A2 milk. It's just a special type of milk that is completely influenced by the genetics, and nothing by the milk processors can't make A2 milk, or how you manage the cow can't make A2 milk. And then you have other features like methane that everybody thinks is, well, that's just really how you feed the cow. Well, not necessarily, because we know there's a genetic influence too. And then what you feed the cow in Ireland is a function, again, of the grass. So the genetics of the grass, the nutrition of the grass, which again goes back to the soil. So you can see it's a holistic system. And one of the areas where I think AgriTech would fall down from, other than the deployment, is actually linking up all of these systems. So you have these entities that are well able to develop a specific part of this chain, but not think about the ramifications upstream and downstream, which is what we do. So we have 9 what we call research performing organizations. I went through most of those. We have over 50 industry partners. We have over 130 academic researchers, and of course we have the industry researchers within that as well. All SFI centers have to be co-funded by industry. We are no exception to the rule. So as from those 50 plus industry partners, they have contributed 3.3 million in cash and double that in kind. And also one of our KPIs is to draw down non-exchequer funding predominantly from the EU. I'm not going to go through individually, but look, that's the type of companies we're dealing with, all the way from the guys who won Young Scientist a few years ago up to the Nestle's and Kerrys of the world, and also your data analytical companies like Accenture, and of course it's Dairy Master as well. So just to finish off, you can see our outputs and impacts. So our outputs obviously is human capital. Don't underestimate this. We are seeing some really top quality people coming through. That heretofore would have been experts in analytics, but wouldn't have known the front and the back of the cow. Now I think we're getting a more balanced person coming out. Intellectual property, licenses, etc. We have a KPI to develop some startup companies. And of course, as an academic, scientific papers are hugely important for us. The impact, of course, is economical, societal, and environmental. So for things like improving the competitive metrics of Ireland, identifying new markets, generating a kind of a vibrant agri-tech industry led by vibrant and enthusiastic and expert people, and attractive to foreign direct investment. From an environmental perspective, enhancing our reputation, putting actual facts behind a lot of these figures. So we hear a lot about carbon sequestration of our soils, but we actually don't know how much our soils are sequestering. So we have a huge piece of work on this. In fact, And probably the end of next week, once all of our towers, or these are the things for measuring sequestration, once all of those are installed, we'll actually have more towers in Ireland to measure sequestration than the whole of Africa. So this is hugely important, tailoring nutrition and crucially also informing policies going into the future. So with that, I think there is exciting opportunities. We are a very cohesive unit of collaborative partners, both academically amongst ourselves, who never worked before. I never actually worked with Alan before at Vista Milk, but also between academia and industry. And of course, while we have some high-level goals, we are still flexible to deliver on the strategic goals as they so arise. So that's me, Ed.
That's great. Thanks, thanks a million, Donna, for a very good overview. I'm going to come back to you in a while. There's some questions coming in here already, so I've one already lined up for you, Donna. So next we have Hazel Peavoy. Hazel works as a senior strategic business partner in agriculture for the Walton Institute, which is WIT's largest research centre. She works very closely with the various actors in the field of agriculture in Ireland and also in Europe. And that strategically places Walton as the lead in the application of various technologies in both agri and in food. She's worked on countless projects with Walton, and they are result from, let's say, basic research all the way right through to the commercialization of the various results of that. So the floor is yours, Hazel.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So can you see my screen there okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So my name is Hazel Peavoy, and as Ed said, I work for Walton Institute, which is part of Waterford Institute of Technology. My main role within Walton, apart from the senior strategic business partner, is that I'm also a site manager for Vista Milk. So my role is predominantly supporting the researchers within Walton and within Vista Milk, I suppose, to match their research to industry partners. So I'm not a researcher myself. I just want to say that from the outset. My job is completely different when it comes to industry and research and the matching of both. So just to give you a quick brief history on Walton, we were previously known as TSSG. We were founded in 1996 and we're currently led by our director, Kevin Doolan. Some of the highlights over the latter couple of years, we were leaders in Europe in FP5, 6 and 7. We received more ICT funding in Horizon 2020, more than all of the IoTs combined. This has kind of given us a really good foothold in Europe with regards to a lot of our researchers sitting on a lot of the steering groups across Europe, and also working groups that kind of influence Horizon Europe and the European Commission and some of the researchers that they're on, some of the research that they're undertaking. We've brought in over 140 million funding into Ireland alone across all of the research that we've actually undertaken. So we are kind of set up in 3 different divisions. So we've got basic research, applied research, and then commercialization. So the basic research, Donna would have spoken to you just there a moment ago about Vista Milk, and we're also involved in Future Neuro, Connect and Lero. What's really good about this for our researchers is that some of them reside in more than one SFI research centre. So as an example, our funded investigators within Vista Milk are also involved in Connect. That gives them a really, really clear insight into research, not just necessarily within the agri sector, but in many other sectors, and how it could be applied into one or more sectors as well, which I think is quite interesting for them. Kevin Doolan then, as I said, is our Director of Innovation, and he is one of the kind of people at the forefront, I suppose, of European funding within Ireland. And he has led some of our largest projects here within Walton, namely projects like Demeter, which is over a 14 million euro project, Cybele, which is based on high performance computing. And he would be the coordinator of some of these large projects out of Europe. So the digitization brings opportunities within Europe for the farming sector in rural areas, but there are limitations and bottlenecks that have to be overcome, such as infrastructure, farmers' awareness about benefits, the skills of the farmers, and the standardization and interoperability of systems, which is what the Demeter project is all about. And then there's also potential risks that we have to consider going forward. All of the projects that we are currently working at the moment, these are just some of them that are listed, and these are the actual benefits of what we're hoping to bring about. So the digitization of agriculture to support the digital single market, precision agriculture and climate change, the ecosystem, and policy support as well. So some of these projects, and that's why I'm not going to necessarily present all of them today. As an example, within Demeter, there will be maybe 27 projects across Europe that will be deployed, innovative projects that will be deployed, and then the outcomes will be brought centrally back into Walton, and then they will be distributed through dissemination, or there will be actual open calls where organizations could take the opportunity to deploy those new technologies into their businesses or into their locations. And then you've got Smart Agri Hubs, which had a large number of pilots as well across all of Europe. So in this particular instance, I think there's about 28 pilots across Europe. Then on the other side of the house, we have our gateway, our technology gateway. John described what the technology gateways do across Ireland. I won't say too much about ours other than our technology gateway manager, Miguel Ponce de Leon, has a huge amount of experience in Europe. And again, when it comes to the European Union grants, he's got a lot of expertise. He's led on a number of large-scale European projects for us, and he can certainly help businesses take that stepping stone, I suppose, from Enterprise Ireland into Europe as well. So one of the projects that I wanted to talk to you about today really was Smart Agri Hubs, and I suppose there is a lot of work in the background, even through the likes of Vistamilk and my role within Vistamilk, as to what we can actually do to support businesses that want to take that stepping stone into Europe. And then I suppose other things that we might be doing that aren't necessarily visible or very visible at the moment as to how we're helping maybe farmers adopt these different technologies. So Smart Agri Hubs is a €20 million project. It's about digitizing and the digital transformation of the European agri-food sector. It's bringing together over 140 digital innovation hubs. At the beginning of the project, we had 140. We were due to attract 260. We're now in excess of 300 at the moment across Europe. There are 28 flagship innovation experiments, 2 of which are currently in Ireland, and Teagasc and Walton are working on 2 of those together. But the most important thing here, I suppose, for industry partners and people on the call today are the actual open calls. So most of these large-scale projects like Smart Agri Hubs, they would have a budget of maybe 20 million euros, and they would ring fence approximately 6 million euros for open calls, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later on today. So some of the work that we've undertaken as part of Smart Agri Hubs, and anybody who's an industry partner should really be registering on the Smart Agri Hubs portal. And the reason for your registration is so that you can then fill out an agricultural technology navigator tool. This is actually quite unique as part of the Smart Agri Hubs portal, and it will actually give us the ability to be able to research what type of technologies are already readily available, so that we're not constantly reinventing the wheel, I suppose, here in Ireland when something might have already been undertaken in France, or more importantly for our French or Netherlands counterparts to maybe have visibility on what the likes of Vistamilk is doing or other partners are doing in this particular area. It also long-term gives us an opportunity to do kind of white spotting on kind of agricultural technologies across Europe, see what potential is out there, where the gaps are maybe, and what's kind of missing there as well. So with all of these different technologies that are being deployed, one thing that we had noticed was maybe a slight skill lacking on the part of the farmers. This was some research that we had undertaken as part of our PhD that we have in Demeter. So SkillNets Ireland brought a number of us together, DAFM, MTU, Vistamilk, ourselves in Walton, and also partners in Teagasc as well, and the IFA. And with SkillNets Ireland over the course of a period of a year, we categorised different, I suppose, swim lanes of training that could be deployed out to farmers, the digital novice, the digital worker, and the digital innovator. So a farmer can actually jump on and get training in these particular areas. They don't necessarily have to jump on in category 1, but they could jump on as they go. What was really interesting about this particular body of work that was done was through the Smart Agri Hubs portal, we presented this work across Europe, and it actually had not been done before anywhere else in Europe, which I found quite surprising. And now we have found that our counterparts within Smart Agri Hubs are looking to undertake a similar exercise, or at least to take a body of work that we've already done through SkillNets Ireland and develop that a little bit further across Europe. And again, so that lessons can be learned and shared across different countries as well within Smart Agri Hubs. Another item that was identified was that there was no clear kind of, I suppose, funding roadmap for Ireland and the UK at the time, where all of the funding was kind of in one place, where an industry partner could kind of log on and kind of run through different opportunities that were available to them. So we published this back in 2019 and we republished it again last month. And again, it's available on the Smart Agri Hubs portal for everybody to view and to click through as well. So again, just to run through the Smart Agri Hubs portal, there's training online that's available for everybody, the calendar of events that is underway at the moment across Europe. So this particular event would have been highlighted there as well. Library of information, which includes papers coming out of some of the projects that I've mentioned, like Demeter, Cybele, Vista Milk papers would also be up there as well. And really, it's about promoting your access into the European Union. You can choose to make yourself as visible as you want on the portal. And there is also a private room there for Ireland and the UK. So if you want to ask any questions there, there's always somebody there to answer your question as well. There's also an interesting exchange program. So we would have worked very closely with Kieran Donoghue and Porrick Hennessy, the two AgTech clusters within Ireland, and we would have looked at trying to match them with similar AgTech clusters across Europe. Again, it was just to try and learn a little bit more, understand a little bit more about other clusters that are available across Europe. Again, lessons learned, and if there was a possibility where Kieran Donoghue and there was an opportunity for him to support a business within his cluster based on maybe information that he would have received from another cluster and another business, where there could be, I suppose, an easier way for them to actually exchange information and a more open forum for them to exchange information. One of the things that we also learned as well through Smart Agri Hubs was we found that with our gateway, uploading or onboarding, I suppose, ICT businesses were really quite simple. But of course, as AgriTech started coming to the fore, we realized that the onboarding was a little bit more tricky and we needed to simplify it. So this was something that we had devised with Miguel Ponce de Leon, who's the manager of the Gateway, this kind of 5-day sprint where you have the problem discovery, the solution elaboration, the prototyping, and you present and report. And again, we found this really, really interesting piece of work to onboard the businesses, but to kind of give them sort of a rapid response to what they were looking for. And again, this could be funded through the Enterprise Ireland funding mechanism. But whilst we were undertaking this work, we had noted in Europe that there was also the EU Commission were starting to drive and look at the possibility of developing European digital innovation hubs. And earlier this year, there was a call in Ireland to look at the possibility of supporting European digital innovation hubs. At the moment, there are 4 being put forward to a closed call in Europe. 2 are due to be funded early next year and 2 are due to be funded in January 2023. So again, you'll see here, you've Tyndall, you've MTU, Vista Milk as part of it as well. So you'll see a lot of these RPOs kind of coming together to try and support industry to take that stepping stone. So on one hand, you'd have the Enterprise Ireland funding mechanism that John spoke about earlier on, and then you have these large-scale European proposals, and somewhere in the middle is that, I suppose, crossing of the chasm. And the European Digital Innovation Hub, in many ways, is to try and bridge that gap, is to try and get you to test before you invest, additional support to find investment. And it's to look a little bit more closely at the ecosystem and the networking around that ecosystem. And again, the skills and training, some of the skills and training that we would have already done in Smart Agri Hubs, but what could be done more, I suppose, to increase the adoption of the technologies that are actually being developed. So the EU Cascade funding that you'll see coming out of Horizon Europe, the differences between Horizon 20 and Horizon Europe, the key differences here is the actual budget. You'll see there's an increase of 20 billion euros for the actual fund itself. Excellence in science and the pillars to open science, societal challenges versus open innovation. As John described earlier, there are a number of clusters, and the most prominent ones, I suppose, for ourselves in agriculture is Cluster 5 around climate, energy and mobility, and Cluster 6 around food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and the environment. There are a number of project types here, like the research and innovation actions, coordination and support actions as well. And some of these would actually, at the moment, the consortiums and the proposals would be underway for at least 12 to 18 months at this particular stage. So a lot of the RPOs across Europe would come together for a particular proposal call. And then, as I explained earlier, you may or may not be successful in a European proposal or European project, such as Smart Agri Hubs. The project budget in that case was 20 million, and the Cascade funding then is 6 million. So with this part is really, really important for the businesses, I suppose, listening today, that there is then opportunities within this Cascade funding, and it's not necessarily all given out at the same time. It can be given out in stages as the project progresses. The whole idea and intention is so that the project outcomes can be trialed either through the businesses, or there could be an opportunity where there are projects that want to trial their outcomes in other countries that are not necessarily already listed within their project. The Cascade funding or the open calls, SMEs can apply. It's normally 3 to 4 weeks. It's normally about a 10-page application. It's not too tedious. The RPOs can help you do it. And there are also consultants out there that will also help you do it as well. There are project types of maybe 6 to 9 months, sometimes up to a year. And then there's several different project types and several different technologies then that are also required. So how do you then actually find the funding? So there's a research participation portal. You'll see this is a screenshot I took recently. You'll see there's quite a number of open calls out there. You just go through them, you find out which one aligns to what you actually want to do in accordance with your business. So say, for example, if we take this one here, which is Next Generation Internet, this is an open call that we currently have out at the moment. So it could be experiments that you want to do in relation and collaborate with US research teams, and you then just click on the button and up will pop the actual text around that. So any additional information, it'll give you the size of the call and the priority kind of coverage areas as well. So how we use the funding from an RPO perspective, and I think this is quite important, I suppose, for industry to understand, that you have different kind of funding channels like Enterprise Ireland and like these open calls. And I suppose at different stages, you can decide to jump in and out of those particular swimming lanes. And so as an example with Miguel in the Tech Gateway at the moment, he has a business that's in and they're using a number of innovation vouchers, but he has also in parallel identified an open call for them in Europe, which they've just applied for in the latter couple of days. And hopefully the funding that they'll get from that will then enhance what they're already trying to do with the Enterprise Ireland funding. So here you'll see we would have, these are the agri projects that we would have been involved with since 2014. There are some missing here at the end. But one that I just wanted to highlight today, just so that I wasn't going to run over in time, was I suppose that having been involved in the Vista Milk project, I suppose I would have taken the opportunity to look at some DAFM funding, which then gave us an opportunity to take on a project called AgriDiscrete. We were successful in winning monies for a project called AgriDiscrete, which actually should be listed here, my apologies. But the outcomes of that particular project, which is due to close now January, February of next year, we've already identified an open call that will potentially take on the outcomes of that particular project. Also then Connected Cows as part of the Connect SFI Research Centre, there would have been opportunity for funding there. And we would have taken that opportunity to develop out a project called Connected Cows. We would have then much later on, almost 3 years later, identified an open call where we've taken our outputs from the Connected Cows project and we've developed a project called MELD. Where we're at with MELD at the moment is we're currently in an EI funded grant, an Enterprise Ireland funded grant to actually commercialise the outcomes of this particular project. So sometimes over a long period of time, you might take a very basic piece of research and bring it to a more applied stage through open calls, and then take the opportunity through Enterprise Ireland funding to actually commercialise it. So just, I suppose, to very briefly say that at the moment we have open calls available on these 4 projects, and sorry, in GI Atlantic as well within Walton. But there are hundreds of open calls, not just within Ireland, but right across Europe. And I would suggest that you try and take advantage and avail of them when and if you can. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hazel. Very comprehensive overview on the various research funding opportunities that are there. And finally, now we have Dr. Alan O'Riordan. Alan is a scientist with Tyndall. He specialises in combining nanomaterials, so very small things, with nanofabrication techniques and analytical science to develop a variety of sensors for customer-specified diagnostic challenges. He's particularly interested in precision agriculture and developing all variety of sensors and biosensors for use in agriculture. Over to you, Alan.
Right. Sorry about that there. I just realized everything was on
Oh, perfect.
yeah, there we go. Now, so can you see my slides there now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Just give me a chance there now to pop up.
Brilliant.
That's it now, is it? It's working?
Yeah, you can see. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. So thank you everybody for attending today. The purpose of my talk is I'm actually not going to go too much into the projects and stuff that we're doing at Tyndall, even though I'll give a slight overview on them, but I want to kind of more talk about what's happening on the European level from the industry associations and the semiconductor industry, and maybe how we can build things in Ireland akin to what's happening on the continent. So as Ed mentioned, my own research group does a lot of work on development of smart sensors and systems for the AgriTech space. But we're particularly interested in sustainable food production. So just a brief overview on the Tyndall National Institute. So Tyndall started in 1984, was originally the NMRC, the National Microelectronics Research Centre, that came out of the Elecenge department in UCC and rebranded in 2004 as we became much bigger and spread across a number of different application areas. Our core business today is still microelectronics or nanoelectronics, and we also have a huge activity in photonics or optical systems. So our main application areas of the institute are these 4 domains here. So we're looking across healthcare and medtech, looking across communications, telecommunications, 5G, 6G, different types of energy, from smart buildings to energy generation on chip to power your mobile phone. And more recently, we started looking at the agri-food and the environment, and we've established a cluster in this space of 11 different research groups, and we entitled the cluster SAFE as an acronym, and it stands for Sustainable Agri-Food and the Environment. And we've over 50 plus researchers involved in this cluster now, and basically our remit is that we want to develop ICT hardware solutions to stakeholder challenges. So problem statements are provided to us by our partners. To this end, we were involved in a number of different projects, both European, Horizon 2020, for example, and now going into Horizon Europe, and different nationally funded projects, both by the Department of Agriculture and SFI. And of course, we work very, very close with other RTOs in the country, particularly in the agri space. We work a lot with Teagasc and Walton through the Vista Milk Centre that Donna mentioned earlier on. So just to give you a little bit of overview, within the European context, within Horizon 2020, we had 106 different projects funded. We led 18 of those, and most of them were in ICT, so the information communication technologies. But I suppose what's interesting here, if you look here on the slide, is we brought in 51.3 million euro to other partners by bringing them into the projects with us, and of that, nearly 20 million of that went to industry partners. So we work with an awful lot of industry partners, obviously, as do the other RTOs in the country. But by being involved with Tyndall and getting into Europe, and we brought a number of companies into European Union projects that hadn't been in European Union before, we were able to up the number or the value of monies coming to industry. So you can see here that 23 SMEs got between them nearly 14 million, and then 15 MNCs were about 5.6 million. So we ideally like to partner with Irish companies as much as we can. Hazel mentioned already there that companies are set, or the consortia are put together to address the challenges as outlined by the European Commission. And if we can get someone in Ireland to be an end user or to be a technology provider and build the ecosystem, that's really part of our remit. And we do work hard to try and engage with our industry partners as much as we can. So within the whole agri-tech space, well, why are we doing it? And Gillian mentioned earlier on that the global population is due to grow to about 9.6 billion by 2050. And depending what sources you read, it's estimated that food production has to increase by 60 to 70% by then. And not only does food production have to increase, but because these more affluent kind of countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, they're demanding more westernized style of diets, there is a need now to increase higher protein contents in these foods. And traditionally, I suppose the agri-tech industry is a traditional industry and would be very much based on what we do know, what we have done before. But really, to increase this food production, we need to eliminate losses, and we need to do things sustainably. And again, this was called out twice already this morning. And one of the ways we see, maybe we're biased, of increasing sustainability is basically to digitalize the whole agri-food system, or the whole agricultural system, from the soil all the way up to food production. And that's what the SAFE cluster is looking to do in Tyndall. So just to discuss sustainability, we use it regularly, the term sustainability, but it's actually, from a kind of definition point of view, it's comprised of 3 different pillars. And none of these pillars can actually be increased at the expense of the others. So you can't increase, say, economic return but kill biodiversity. So it's really important that if you're looking to increase any of these, you have to do it in parallel. So there's obviously, it's comprised of societal benefits, so things like enhanced societal goals, like zero hunger, as called out by the United Nations development goals. There is the economic return. We want to increase the return to farmers and to the industries in the space. And then, of course, there's the conservation of biodiversity to make sure that there's no more degradation of the biome occurs. And this is very much at the forefront of the European Union's Green Deal, particularly where they have also engaged and adopted the principle of do no significant harm. So what this means is that no research should be undertaken or funded that will actually cause damage to the environment, say pollute the water courses or produce more greenhouse gases. So it's very much, how can we increase the food production, but let's not do any more damage, and can we do it economically and socially and environmentally friendly. So pretty much then, to digitalize the industry, right, we need to come together with the Internet of Things. Again, this is already called out. And what is the Internet of Things? Well, it's a confluence of different sensors and systems which are then put together to address a key problem statement. And the data coming from those sensor and systems is integrated into, say, a management system where you could have edge analytics or big data predictions undergoing. And this will all feed back into a more sustainable loop, okay? And there's many different places in this loop that Irish industry can be involved in, okay? Within Tyndall, within my group, we're looking at developing the smart sensors. So we look at the chemical and the biochemical sensors that will actually enable some of these detection paradigms. And we work across from really fundamental science, where we're looking at things like simulations to really explain to us how these sensors and chemical sensors will work, how molecules can diffuse to them and away from them, to actually fabricating the sensors. So Tyndall has the only silicon chip research fabrication lab on the island. And we were able to use that to prototype a variety of different sensors, which we can then test and challenge. And we can make them into systems. As Donna mentioned earlier, we can go out into the field. We can use them in test beds and try to understand if they work. And when they fail, we can understand why they fail and go back and try reiterate it around the design and the fabrication to make them more robust. And as well as make the sensors, we can then functionalize them to make them specific for what we want them to test for. For example, a couple of examples here, looking for volatile organic compounds in breath analysis, to calcium and magnesium detection in milk, to antibodies, to virus detection, to allergens in food. And then, of course, that's great when you have them made in the lab, but then you need to integrate them on microelectronic or with some sort of communication system. So we can develop the analog front ends or the electronics around these, and then we can set up communication systems where your mobile phone, for example, can be used to interrogate the sensors and get that real-time data within a few minutes to feed them back into the farmer or the end user, so they can make an informed decision. And that's the kind of work that we're doing within Vista Milk, we're doing within Demeter, we're doing within other EU projects, where we're looking at key challenges that face the farmers in sustainable production. And I mean, the farmers are at the coalface, right? The farmers and the industry in AgTech are at the coalface to implement those really kind of grandiose goals that have been set by the European Commission. So within the Green Deal, for example, it said we need to reduce nitrates losses by 50% by the year 2030. But how are farmers going to do that unless they're given the tools to enable them to see how much nitrates, what's the concentration in their soil or in their slurry or in their dirty water, and prevent that leaking into the water courses. So this is where Internet of Things can really help, and where Irish industry can feed into developing these technologies, but they must be driven by key problem statements, and problem statements that are relevant to the end users. And a number of these IoT technologies are basically they're driven by the microelectronics industry, right? Because they rely on electronics, and it's only in the recent 2 years that the microelectronics industry globally is looking at AgriTech. So we have a road mapping exercise that's going on with globally, but it's been led by the European semiconductor industries, and there's a number of industry associations that Irish companies can join, right? And by being involved in those industry kind of technology platforms, they can influence. You can actually influence what calls will come out of the EU, what kind of funding, and what challenges and problem statements will be funded. So ourselves, we're very heavily involved on the European stage with regard to policy. Hazel mentioned that Kevin Doolin is involved as well, which they are in TSSG. But come to us with your problem statements, and we can actually get that on the European roadmap. So we can actually influence the way that Europe will spend their money. And the reason the electronics industry are now getting involved in the whole agri space is that the market is growing at a really fast rate. It's in double-digit growth. The compound annual growth rates are in double figures, and it's actually estimated that edge of cloud devices, data-driven systems, will actually include 11% of the world economy by 2030. So that shows you how much it's growing. And the smart sensor technology and the agri-food is expected to go up to grow by 16.2% by 2023. And it's important, like I mentioned, that we identify to be able to deliver successfully into that market, into those emerging markets, means growing markets. Means we really need to identify what the problem statements are. And we've been looking at doing landscape analysis and looking at what are the different problems, or where can IoT be implemented across different sectors of the Irish industry. And this is just one example of, say, pasture-based dairying, where we had some interns in over the summer. We introduced them to a number of researchers in Teagasc and in different RTOs and in industry, and try to identify where IoT technologies would be applicable in that space. Because I suppose up until now, really, this has been driven by the kind of technology producers or the RTOs, right? And they haven't involved the whole ecosystem. So really what we want to do, and because there's been a lack of focus really, and end users haven't been involved in this roadmap and process, then some of the technologies that have come out in the early days of precision agriculture have failed, right? So really what we need to do is to engage at an early stage, before we even start the research, before we even start developing new systems, with the whole ecosystem. And we need to develop this. Now, it works in other in other sectors. It's very high in the it works very well in the medtech space, for example. But we need to bring together a cluster of, for example, here, this is just on the dairy side of things, but we need to look at like the SMEs, who's providing the fundamental kind of hardware that can go into the generating the systems. Obviously, academics and research organizations need to be involved. It needs to be supported by local and national government on a national level, because while this is all happening on an EU scale, we can also replicate this in Ireland, and we can all build the agri-tech sector so it gets much stronger in this country. So that's all over here on the technology side, but we also need to engage the end users. So we have to have the farmer engagement. So if you're developing a sensor for something or a system for something, well, you need to know what you're developing is right, and that needs to be influenced, or not influenced. It needs to be kind of explained very clearly to the technology developers what's required by the end user. So we should have a kind of design thinking approach, even including social scientists, where they will go out and interview potential end users and find out what the needs actually are, feed them back in. So when something is developed, it'll be robust and it'll actually have market take up and penetration, which is really what you want. And so rural community and social engagement is critically important here, as well as then engaging on the international scene. So what you're doing in Ireland can then be replicated across Europe. So if we have a very strong cluster or an ecosystem in Ireland, well, then that ecosystem is very well poised to leverage different activities within the EU. So it was mentioned there earlier on the scale of funding. Hazel pointed out what's happening within Horizon Europe. Within Cluster 6, there is a load of different research funding opportunities available and these can lead up to 100% funding for a company. So it actually doesn't cost any money to get involved in these projects. You get funded 100% for your full-time equivalents. You can get overhead and you can get consumables. So it's an area, basically, if you want to grow and develop, it's something that you should really look at. And if you move into the inside of the circle, then again, you need the people that will provide all of these things. So it's one thing developing a sensor, but then you need to use it. And Teagasc, for example, have excellent test beds where you can deploy your technologies to understand how and where it fails, so you can prove it before you get to market. And this is obviously all underpinned by scientific research excellence. So I'm hoping today, I stayed away from kind of the projects we're in, but I'm hoping today that we can use this forum to start building this ecosystem where we can all engage together to try and develop the agri-tech industry within Ireland and become market leading, because Ireland is actually ideally placed to become a world leader on this stage. We just need to kind of believe in ourselves and come together and address the key problems. So that's me, Ed. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks a million, Alan. Okay, so I might get all our panelists back online again, and there's some questions that are there, and but I'll start with you, John, maybe first of all. You're our first speaker, and if a company or a participant that's on here and they want to, let's say, dip their toe in the water at the smaller end of the scale, so maybe they want to start with, let's say, a small innovation voucher. It's a startup type company, 5,000 euros. What do they need to do, and what's the timeline roughly, if assuming that once we finish this Zoom, they lift the phone and they phone John Barry? What's John Barry going to say to them is what we want to know.
Right, yeah. So I'd say typically what we'd aim for is if we're the right gateway to tackle the project, and there's 15 others in fairness, and we all have our own expertise. So if we're the right gateway to tackle the problem, we'd aim to reach a stage where we've scoped the project. And we do that by defining the so-called knowledge questions. They then entered into the Enterprise Ireland application portal online. You're looking at 2 to 3 weeks to get a decision.
Okay.
So as soon as we can define the project, and sometimes I actually defined the project over the phone with a client last week, 5-minute discussion.
Yeah.
It's gone in now to Enterprise Ireland, and so in 2 weeks, formalize that project. So it can happen very quickly.
And for the largest projects you do, John, then obviously, what would be the typical timeline on those? The innovation, the innovation partnerships first, and let's say I might talk to Hazel when we come on to the European projects in a while, But for timeline on those approximately.
Timeline on those, Ed. So to draft up the application, you're looking at as little as, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. It could be 1 to 2 months if the corporate funding is required, to arrange that. And then the decision, there's a decision and committee meeting every month, more or less, within Enterprise Ireland. So once we submit it and the development advisor is on board, you could be looking at as little as 3 months from your initial discussion to approval.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, John. Donna, I might talk to you next. Vista Milk, there's a whole load of activities going on there. Again, for a participant that's on here, why would they want to get involved in Vista Milk? What would be the main reasons in your view? You're on mute, Donna.
Sorry, yeah, it probably depends on where they're coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a techie or if you're an ag person, the main reason is that we have subject matter experts across the whole domain from soil to society. So from my own perspective, like we have the problem statements, we know what the issues are. You know me, Ed, you know I'm pretty
That's
blunt.
right, yeah.
So if somebody comes to me with a sensor that's going to measure a cow's tail length, I'm going to say, nah, complete waste of time. So like we have the expertise across the whole, as well as the whole domain areas like sensing, comms, data analytics, etc. We also have the test beds, of course, because we have the cows here. We have MTL, which is a mini kind of processing that people can deploy a lot of their technologies. Mm-hmm. We also have a co-funding mechanism, which is kind of running out, but we part fund a bit of research depending on where the intellectual property lies. And we also have 50 industry partners. So if you're a small entity, I asked the larger entities once upon a time about startups coming on. I said, look, they've got no money to put in. Are you happy for them to be involved? They said, oh, most certainly, because if they've got a really good idea, we'll just buy them out. You know, so there's a quid pro quo there. And then finally, I think we're a bit visionary from an agri perspective and also from a tech perspective, as we see what's coming down the line and we see what new technologies will bring.
Yeah, no, very good. And I have another question in from the audience, and I'm going to ask you that one as well, Donna. It's in relation to blockchain, and I might ask some of the rest of them as well, but I said I'd ask you first. And the question is, do you mind giving a perspective on blockchain and what the outlook for blockchain is in the food industry? And I'll add to that. And I suppose, do you think it's something that can add value, or do you think it's a technology that's looking for the problem statement?
I think it might. No, I'm no expert, so I should qualify by that. I'm not convinced yet.
Okay.
Right. I think it is fiercely useful in many other countries. But we have such a system here. Okay, be it like we have it in pockets at the moment. We have the best, I would argue, well, probably one of the best animal-based databases in the world. We have the best pasture-based database and soil-based database in the world. You don't need blockchain in my. That's
right, to tie together.
Link those. So I'm still to be convinced from an Irish agri-food perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you on that. Has any of the other speakers any commentary on that, or would they agree or would they disagree with Donna's views there? Alan?
I tend to agree.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced either.
Okay, very good, very good.
But I'm also, I will give you the health statement there, the health check. I'm not an expert in blockchain either.
Okay.
That's me get out of jail card there.
Yeah. Hazel, I'm going to come to you now. You know, you've been very successful at looking at, let's say, EU funding calls and so on. Again, if there's somebody on here and they don't really know that much about it, they know there's opportunity there. How do they go after it, let's say, or what are the things that they should do, you know, if they want to be successful, let's say, or to get involved in, let's say, you know, Horizon Europe type project?
Well, first of all, I would definitely encourage them to take the route through the gateways with the likes of John and so on and so forth, and any of the gateways across the country, because that'll kind of give them a really good insight into what their technology needs are, and it will actually give them an insight into how the RPOs work as well, which I think is really important. Yeah. And then off the back of that, they can identify the projects across Europe, either by attending presentations like this, so that they can identify a project that might fall in line with their kind of company needs. But the actual open calls really themselves, I think, is probably the easiest stepping stone for them, long and ever before they ever get involved in a really heavy hitting consortium. Yes. I think the open calls are an easy stepping stone, and then it's something that's more in line with their company needs.
And what kind of timeline, again, going back to just to get a sense of that, because I suppose my view is the timeline would be, let's say, a lot longer. You know, I suppose they're a bigger pot of funding, let's say, and they tend to be a longer timeline. What kind of timelines would be typical in that side of things?
So for the open calls, it's normally about a 10-page application. And again, the RPO that you're working with will assist, or in many cases, fill out the application for you. It normally takes about 3 weeks thereabouts. So we would always say allowed 3 weeks, because sometimes the RPOs are already heavily involved in funding rounds or funding calls. So we would always encourage you to allow 3 weeks approximately to kind of from the beginning of the proposal to when it's actually submitted. And a lot of these open calls are open for anything. Sometimes they could be open for up to 9 months. So it's not a fast and hard deadline as such.
Yeah.
And then once they've actually submitted, it normally takes maybe 2 or 3 months for them to get their answer as to whether they've actually received the funding or not. And once you've received your answer and signed the contract, you can pretty much start away. And most of the projects then last anything from 6 months to a year, with staged payments throughout that period of time.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay.
And I suppose, sorry, I should say that the fund then depends on the open call, but it can be anything from 100,000 to 350,000 euros.
Okay, I get you. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, Alan, I suppose we can't go too far these days without hearing about the shortage of chips in the world and the whole electronics industry and how it's changing everything, you know. So in terms of the international roadmap for devices and semiconductors and what's going to happen in that space, and then maybe, you know, you might just comment on that, and then maybe its application to agriculture, what do you see happening there?
Yeah, I can. Well, I'll go back to the chips thing first, right? So obviously what happened was COVID came, all car production stopped. COVID is kind of going away. Car production is starting again. Car companies are screaming for chips and are getting an awful lot of them. So they're taking an awful lot of the global supply. This is compounded by the fact that there was a drought in Taiwan and in Silicon Valley. And I suppose semiconductor fabrication takes loads of water. So they were restricted in the amount of chips they could actually make. So the two of those kind of combined to make the perfect storm, I suppose. With regard to the IRDS that you mentioned earlier, that originally started off as the microelectronics industry deciding a roadmap, a technology roadmap for the silicon chip industry back in the days when they were trying to increase the number of transistors per chip and make computers faster and more powerful. But that's reached its natural end. And what they find now is they can no longer just make the transistors smaller and get better results. They have to combine it with other materials, right? And what they're also seeing now is different application areas, say medtech or agri, right? Silicon is no longer a solution. It needs to be integrated with different materials and different components and different devices to make a system. And now they're kind of the big major multinationals, silicon chip or kind of chip producers are starting to say, where's the roadmap for that? Because they're so, as engineers, they're so used to having a roadmap that they're now trying to create one where you're bringing loads of different components together that's outside the control of the industry. And what we're finding is when you're trying to do those roadmaps is there's no point sitting down as engineers anymore trying to figure it out. You need to know, because you won't be able to figure it out, because you need to know what the problems are now. There was a problem before, double the number of transistors every 8 months. That's gone. So this is why I was trying to say, and maybe not very well, we need that ecosystem of everybody involved to inform those, to point out what the problems are that can then feed back up to the industry that they can actually address them. Okay, so a chip for one thing can't be used for a chip in another space anymore. Yeah, it goes down to TRL once you change the levels, once you change the applications.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. I'm just going to check to see if we any more questions there from our panel, from our audience. No, I think we're pretty good. I have pages more of questions that I could ask you all, but I'm just mindful of people's time. There's some polls and questions that are popping up in Zoom there for the participants, and we'd very much appreciate if they could be filled out. I want to say thanks very much to the panelists for their time this morning, and to the audience for attending, as well as IT at Cork for organising the event, and also the Mayor for the opening address. It was a very informative session. It highlights a lot of the good work that's happening in the sector and why it's important. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I look forward to connecting with many of you and seeing you soon. So thanks again to our panelists, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Very much. Bye-bye.